because it's all Labradors.
They are wonderful dogs.
Talking to my vet, and my dog's having trouble gaining weight, and he said, well, that was a natural occurrence because when they were training Labradors, if the Labrador responded to a treat and trained well, that's the one you bred and bred up. If the Labrador kind of ignored you and didn't pay any attention to treats, that's the one you didn't breed. So they bred this kind of voracious hunger into Labradors, and now we're paying the price for it because my dog, we've had like 6 Labradors, and this is the first one that counter surfs. I mean, if you leave anything on the counter, he'll be out there to grab it off.
Yeah,
I mean, anything.
My dad had one that puzzled out how to open the refrigerator.
Oh my gosh.
And got into a carton of eggs. That was a disaster. Yeah. That was Cody.
Cody's a good name for him. Our latest one we bought him. And he's the highest energy one we've ever had. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Nice to see everybody here. Everybody's still wearing masks and keeping your distance. We just saw, or I just heard on the news, the rate of infection with the variants, and now the variants are the predominant strain. It's not even the original strain, and the variant is more infective, it's more dangerous, it's more deadly, and worst of all, it's infecting children or younger people more virulently than the older strain. And it's increasing 10, 20, 30% in some places. So even though people are getting their vaccinations, we have to maintain distance and wear your masks no matter what anybody tells you. Okay, that's kind of a sidelight. Welcome to First Universalist Church of New Madison on this kind of rainy spring morning. The sun, I think, is coming out now, and the flowers are beginning to bloom, so we're happy to see spring arrive. Happy to have Derek with us again from El Dorado, bringing the message. That'll be hopefully once a month if we can arrange it. Our welcome is 416 in your hymnal in the back. Holy and beautiful, the custom which brings us together in the presence of the Most High, to face our ideals, to remember our loved ones in absence, to give thanks, to make confessions, to offer forgiveness, to be enlightened and to be strengthened. Through this quiet hour breathes the worship of ages, the cathedral music of history. 3 unseen guests attend: faith, hope, and love. Let all our hearts prepare them a place. That's by Robert French Levins. You can probably tell what our theme for the week is: Labradors. They come in a variety. Now they have a silver Labrador, but you've got black, white, and chocolate. And I see now they have silver Labradors, so I haven't seen one in the flesh yet, but I'm looking forward to it. Okay. And as everybody knows, Labradors are basically a service dog. They came in primarily for hunting, but they're such a nice dog and such an obedient dog. And we were talking about the training thing, how they've been trained up by history and by the way the world works. Any dog that responded to treats, that was the dog that you bred to have more dogs because they were easy to train. Any dog that ignored food and wouldn't respond to your training cues was the one you didn't breed, so you didn't have many of those. So what they've created is a race of dogs that will eat anything, anytime, and will do anything for food. And that is a good thing, but it does make them kind of a pest, but they're a lovable pest. And this is a guide dog, the one I've got a picture of here, but they're more than a guide dog. They're a companion. They're a friend. They're someone you can depend on. Any announcements? Okay, we'll go to the prelude. It's Hymn by Vangelis, and we're really happy to have Roberta back with us again. music, where would we be without it? The spirit that feeds the soul. Next is chalice lighting, and you can see by the slides, not only are they service dogs and guide dogs, they are also, and I didn't know this, if you look at the picture on the right, what it says is therapy dogs waiting for their morning shift begin at a children's hospital. And they love their work. And then, of course, if you have a Labrador, you know they like to have something in their mouth at all times. So this is a picture you will see very often. Okay, our chalice lighting. This is All Souls Chalice Lighting by Viola Abbott. As we light the chalice and fully embrace the sacred space created here this morning, please hold in your hearts the Unitarian Universalist principle, which calls upon us to respect the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Today we remember those who share this earth with us no longer. We bear witness to their lives and to the roles they have played in ours. We pay homage and to make stronger that web which connects us all. Our opening hymn is number 8 in the hymnal. Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, and one line, I am empty, time flies from me, what is time? Our affirmation, and this one, as you know, they are trained for hunting, they're trained to retrieve. I'm kind of soft-hearted, so I don't like to see the pictures of Labradors bringing back dead ducks. So what you're getting is a training mod instead. It works just as good. And as you see, he's wetter than the son of a gun. They love the water. Affirmation, all that we share is sacred, by Andre Moy. This blessing was written in honor of two Unitarians, Martha and Waitzel Sharp, who during World War II dared to risk their own comfort in order to help save the lives of those in desperate need. They were citizens of Belgium. And I think I've done this before, maybe 2 or 3 months ago. As we gather together, may we remember when you share with me what is most important to you. That is where listening begins. When I show you that I hear you, when I say your life matters, that is where compassion begins. When I open the door to greet you, that is where hospitality begins. When I venture out to bring you shelter, that is where love begins. When I risk my comfort to ease your suffering, when I act against hatred, violence, and injustice, that is where courage begins. When we experience the full presence of each other because of our shared humanity, because of our differences, that is where holy gratitude begins. May this space be a table that is not complete until all are welcome. May this table be a space of beauty where together we create a series of miracles and where all that we share is sacred. May it be so. Children's story. I keep doing this, although we don't have any kids. Does anybody have a problem? Would they like to not just skip the children's story and do something else, or is that all right with everybody? I kind of get a kick out of it because sometimes children's stories, they kind of distill what takes the goodness and decency out of life and put it into something that children can understand. And sometimes I feel a lot like a child. So, hey little ant. There's a kid bending down looking at the ant on the sidewalk. Hey little ant down in the crack, can you hear me? Can you talk back? See my shoe? Can you see that? Well, now it's going to squish you flat. And the ant, please, oh please, do not squish me. Change your mind and let me be. I'm on my way with a crumb of pie. Please, oh please, don't make me die. And here's the ant. Actually, he's got two little suitcases, not a crumb of pie, so the artist and the author were kind of not on the same page. Anyone knows that ants can't feel? You're so tiny, you don't look real. I'm so big and you're so small, I don't think it'll hurt at all. And there's the giant boy and the little ant down on the ground. Ant, but you are a giant, and giants can't know how it feels to be an ant. Come down close, I think you'll see that you are very much like me. Kids, are you crazy? Me like you? I have a home and a family too. You're just a speck that runs around. No one would care if my foot came down. Ant, oh big friend, you are so wrong. My nest mates need me because I am strong. I dig out nest and feed baby ants too. I must not die beneath your shoe. And here's the ants all surround the table, which is a twist top off a pop bottle. But my mom says that ants are rude. They carry off our picnic food. They steal our chips and breadcrumbs too. It's good if I squish a crook like you. And here's the ant in a little burglar's mask with a flashlight. Hey, I'm not a crook, kid. Read my lips. Sometimes ants need crumbs and chips. One little chip can feed my town. So please don't make your shoe come down. And there's the ants carrying off a crumb of a potato chip. All my friends squish ants every day. Squishing ants is a game we play. They're looking at me, they're listening too. They all say, I should squish you. And there's all of his friends, and we all know what kids can be like, and no one has been able to explain why kids are like that. I can see you're big and strong. Decide for yourself what's right and wrong. If you were me and I were you, what would you want me to do? So here's the ant with his spectacles on and a giant size. Should the ant get squished? Should the ant go free? It's up to the kid, not up to me. We'll leave the kid with the raised up shoe. What do you think that kid should do? And that's where we're leaving the story. And this is our family. This is Pikea, who is a puppy, was a lapdog. and never grew out of it. So he was a lap dog until the day he passed. And the one next door is Rocket. That's his replacement, number 5. He's called Rocket because he never slows down. He is the fastest Labrador I've ever seen. He is also the weirdest Labrador we've ever had. He doesn't like water. I have to drag him into the tub outside to give him a bath. And when you throw something, he'll go eat it if it's food, but he won't bring it back if it's a stick. He'll just go look at it and then go on to do something else. So I think something went wrong in his lineage somewhere, but he's a nice dog anyway. Okay, sharing of joys and concerns. Anybody? Dee.
Oh, I'm so used to standing up. I don't need
You can stand up. You don't have to.
I'm sure this is the feeling of everyone. Are we not grateful for the rain? It was getting dry out there. If you've done any puttering around in your flower beds, it got really a lot drier than I realized. So I am so grateful finally for a really nice, steady rain that we've had yesterday and today.
Do you know how much we got?
I didn't look this morning.
We got a half an inch in our gauge.
Yeah, Richmond, it was half an inch too.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Gentle warm rain, a little bit of thunder, which we had the day before, and we got almost 4/10 the day before. And now if we can get some 70-degree days, it'll be mushroom time. So keep your eyes open. If you don't like them, give them to me. I'll take care of them.
I found a bunch of morels yesterday.
Morels you found yesterday? All right. I've got a place where I look around the old apple tree, and usually when I see it the first time I mow, which I haven't mowed yet, but I'm still looking because occasionally when I mow over them, which is a tragedy beyond words. But I still pick up all the pieces and fry them anyway. So, as I mentioned before, we have to keep the virus in mind. Keep your distance. Wear your masks. People are crowding into, particularly in Florida and the states that are relaxing their rules, telling people they can gather. The rates are increasing dramatically. We're going to be back in the soup if we can't get this thing straightened out a little bit. Keep up the vaccinations. I think the vaccination supply has come almost equal to the people who want it now. Now we're down to the place where we have to convince people to do it, the people who don't want to do it. And I don't know. Yes?
Michigan seems to be the state that is mentioned most on the news.
For the increase, yeah, their hospital occupancy is almost 99% now. They are right on the cusp of being in dangerous territory. When the conservatives used to tell us that modern health care, the Obamacare would bring triage and people would have to be sorted through and decisions made on who lived and who died, we're actually coming to that now. Who gets into the ICU and who doesn't, based on the quality of life that they could have. That's not what you would expect to find in an advanced country like this. Not what you want to find. Mike?
Just back to spring, if you could light a candle for the wonderful variety of flowers. We were blessed with daffodils just a couple weeks ago, and now we have flowering pear and tulips of all colors, and beautiful this year, flowering magnolias and the purples, the blues. It's spring, and I think that definitely needs a candle. And then, of course, the other thing you probably know me as a royalist. I'd like for you to light a candle for His Royal Highness the passing of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, 99 years. And I was so glad to hear this royalist was on the news this morning. They actually mentioned that he has the most probably royal pedigree of any modern royal in history, and there will never be another one aside from pedigree, but certainly his many, many years of service.
And if you listen to some of course everybody's doing long funeral or long obituary type stuff about him. He was a pretty interesting person. He was sometimes not totally in control of his mouth. It went from his head or his brain to his mouth like instantly. And there were some pretty interesting things that he had to kind of back out of, or the family had to kind of back out for him. So, but isn't that kind of refreshing? You get kind of tired of politicians. We were talking about that the other day when somebody comes on the TV and they're talking to a reporter. You can tell a politician from a real person because they have a certain speak which doesn't really say anything, but it sounds real encouraging, but you can't pin them down. There's always a way that they can get out of whatever they say.
Meaning mouth.
Yeah, it's kind of discouraging. Not that I'm pushing people to go the other direction, because we've had an administration that told us exactly what they thought, which was horrifying. I would have much rather not heard what they thought and had them not do what they are thinking of doing. All right, well, anything else? Yes?
There is a note in the back for Jeanette Burns, if anybody wants to sign.
Yes, Jeanette's been having some problems, and as you know, we have cards here and stamps, so if everybody, before they leave, we'll put their John Henry on the note, we'll send it to Jeanette, and maybe we can do, I think we're doing visitation anyway. Oh, also flowers. We'll be finalizing that in the next few weeks. We will be doing, I checked at Menards, you can get 2 cubic feet of potting soil for like $10, and has the fertilizer in it. We can get pots fairly cheap, and you can buy a flat of plants for a couple bucks. So our plan is to copy what El Dorado's doing, is to create plants for either our shut-ins or maybe everybody if we have enough to do it and enough people that want to do it. And we'll just take these around and present them as something that they can keep track of what's going on with the summer. All right, one more for those hopes and dreams, fears, those night terrors, those things that you can't express, that we all feel, and you're welcome to share with us either individually, personally. You can send us a message. You can slip a note under the door. I say it every week, but it's true. We are here for you if you need us. Okay, our message is Why, Lord? And this is Pikea again when he was in better health a few years ago at the lake. This dog loved the water. You could not keep him out of the water.
I want to begin by offering my thanks to our church, our neighboring church, the Universalist Church in El Dorado, for releasing me about once a month to come up here and be with you. It is a joy each and every time. And for our friends and neighbors who may be watching from home, know that we are holding you in our hearts, and we are both hoping for and working towards a world where we will be less isolated, and we will see you again someday, face to face. To introduce today's message, we have a reading from the Tao Te Ching from Lesson 1. The way that can be told is not the eternal way. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. So I was once at a conference for more progressive thinking ministers. It was an ecumenical conference, and the conversation turned to hymnals. There's a whole sort of industry and very arcane process to putting together hymnals. A lot of work goes into it, which is why you only see them published like maybe once every 20, 30 years, because it requires a monumental amount of work. But somebody made a really interesting observation. What's the difference between the Unitarian Universalist hymnal, Singing the Living Tradition, and the United Church of Christ hymnal, the New Century hymnal? What is the difference? The difference is the Unitarian Universalist hymnal has the word Lord in it more often than the hymnal from the United Church of Christ, which was really, really interesting. Unitarian Universalists using the word Lord more often than their more mainline Christian counterparts. And the observation at first glance looks like it might be true. I have not personally tested this, though, by taking out both hymnals and doing a census. Because sometimes these things get talked about at conferences, and maybe it looks true, but if you count up enough, maybe it's not as true as it looks. But it was a little aha moment. And there are reasons why this could be the case. There are publishing quirks that happen for a reason that should not be too startling. The two hymnals were published with very different motives. The United Church wanted a hymnal that was more gender inclusive than their previous hymnal. So they systematically tried whenever they could to eliminate or minimize words for God that had an obvious gender. The Unitarian Universalists, when producing our hymnal, wanted one that was more multicultural than the previous hymnal, and so we included words and hymns from African American traditions, and at the same time were very reluctant to modify the traditional wordings that these African American communities had used. And so you end up unexpectedly with having the word Lord in a bunch of places in our hymnal. But that word, the Lord, that's been a tough one for me. It is so emphatically male, and it conjures up images of medieval nobles and kings sitting on thrones, big beards swaying in the heavenly breeze, and usually a nice gold crown on the head. And it's really a way of experiencing God or thinking about God that I've tried to get away from for years, because at a certain level, it just feels way too small. Way too small. I've tried to get away from it, but never completely made it. There are hymns I love where the word shows up. We're going to sing one today later. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Oh, yes, Lord. Yep, it's in there. There are also pieces of sacred poetry, like the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And there are pieces of classical music, particularly settings of the Nunc Dimittis, that I'm fond of. At a different point in my life, I was visiting a Buddhist temple in Bloomington, Indiana, and a young monk, not Asian by the way, but a native Hoosier, his hair was tonsured, but you could see a bit of bright red blonde stubble coming up. Not what you would expect at a Buddhist monastery, but if there's a Buddhist monastery in Indiana, you might expect them to recruit people like him. The young monk was giving my husband and I a tour, and I noticed a statue of what I identified as the Buddhist goddess Kuan Yin, who represents healing and mercy. And when I mentioned this, the tour guide quickly corrected me. In our lineage tradition, in Buddhist speak, in our lineage, we call her Green Tara. Same figure, but we use a different name. So I replied, is there like a big difference? And he said, in the big picture, no name is really even needed or real. But she allows us to use a name as a charity to mortal men and women, because we need some kind of name for our minds to grasp and to have some common point of reference when we talk to one another. So in our tradition, we use the Tibetan designation, Green Tara, as the common point of reference, instead of the Chinese terminology of calling her Kuan Yin. I, however, am not a Buddhist, although I get a lot of interfaith wisdom from bringing Buddhism into dialogue. I'm not Tibetan, I'm not Chinese. I'm a Westerner of the Midwestern American variety, who's found a great deal of inspiration in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, and those are my points of reference, or at least a good number of them. And despite my attraction to pieces of music singing about the Lord and sacred poetry speaking about the Lord, I'll be among those who say that the related images of enthroned royal men are not my favorites. There is, however, a tradition in Hebrew sacred literature of not giving God a real fixed name. The tradition rests in an attempt to avoid keeping the higher power in a box of our own making. And so cryptic sets of consonants get used, often translated into English as YHWH, and you're not supposed to pronounce it Yahweh, not if you're being in any way devout as a Jew. Sometimes divine euphemisms get used, like the Eternal One, as well as the Hebrew term Adonai, which gets translated into English as Lord. The meaning in Hebrew is a bit more complicated, though, than defining Adonai as Lord in the medieval nobility sense. The Hebrew word contains concepts of leadership, protection, creativity, and mastery. And by mastery, I mean not master and slave, but master, teacher, and student. Someone who has the wisdom and expertise to convey something profound to one who is willing to learn. In that last sense, Lord should not be completely alien to us. The 1935 Universalist Washington Avowal of Faith spoke of the spiritual leadership of Jesus. So while not my favorite word for God, Lord is not completely foreign to me, which is a good thing because I often need to translate the religious words of others into my own language, and I need to be able to translate back. In one of my ministries, I provide activities, including religious activities, in the memory care unit of a retirement community. When people are in the midst of Alzheimer's and dementia, it is not a compassionate thing to debate religious language, quibble about imagery or gender, or to insist on my own theological preferences. You're just going to need to work with people where they are at that point. What we are all trying to make is that which is the ultimate ground of reality, which eludes being completely captured by any of our namings. Our names for the ground of reality are a charity extended to our limited being, our finite being. They are religious word symbols, and like all religious symbols, need to be handled with a light touch. The symbol points at something beyond itself. In Taoism, it is the name that points towards the eternal name, but which itself is not the eternal name. Or in the Jewish faith, Adonai attempting to point out qualities of the higher power. Or in Zen Buddhism, our religious word symbols are spoken about as fingers pointing at the moon. So look at what the finger is pointing at, instead of focusing on the finger itself. It occurs to me likewise that somebody who just came off the street might get confused that maybe we are fire worshipers, since we light a chalice. But the chalice is a symbol, and it points to a reality beyond itself, to community, to the light of wisdom, and the fire of love and compassion. In the end, what I want us to pay attention to is something much larger than the word Lord, although in our culture, noticing that word, Lord, and all its usefulness, tradition, and limitations should not be ignored. So I would say that we should be generous to others and yourselves with the religious word symbols we use. try to puzzle out the fingers pointing towards the moon. Be intentional with that language. Understanding what you're trying to point at, but also the limitations. I know that I would want others to be generous with me when I'm not using their preferred language. And so I should at least extend that courtesy to them when they are speaking to me. So as for me, I've decided that with regards to the word Lord, anyone who wants may use that symbol. But I would also say that none of us are required to use it either. And the words don't end with me here.
Not here they don't.
No.
Do you have a sense the word Lord or the term or the title is becoming a little more androgynous? I keep thinking about Lord of the Rings. I keep thinking about all the things that are coming at us educationally or just entertainment-wise. Game of Thrones. Powerful women are becoming more and more exemplified or raised up in our society, and even more women CEOs. And
I would even say, so I'm an avid reader of science fiction and fantasy, and I have noticed, and I wish I could pull a title in my mind where someone has done this, but I've noticed younger authors, when speaking of a female character in that kind of like leadership position in the fantasy world, often giving that female character the title Lord instead of Lady.
Yes.
There may still be a very feminine name attached, but it's a very interesting thing. And of course, this is just what's going on in English. I have no idea what goes on like in the Spanish-speaking world, or German, which is one of the most genderfied languages on the planet, because it has male, female, and neuter pronouns and articles, and sometimes they do bizarre things. For example,
connected to sex for some reason.
Oh yeah, no, it's interesting. So in German, the word for girl is das Mädchen. However, das is a neuter article, even though a woman is die Frau, a female article. I don't understand the psychology of the German language. I just know enough to be slightly dangerous to myself. So, Dee.
What do Unitarian Universalists tend to use other than Lord? Like source of all, source of wisdom. I can think of those words, but do we have others that are common?
It depends on where you are. I have seen congregations that play with the Mother Spirit, Father Spirit language very effectively. I have seen some UU congregations try to use completely gender-neutral God words, either just God or Eternal One or Source of All or Love with a capital L.
Love.
Or sometimes I've been, and I've done this one myself, differentiating between capital T truth and small t truth. We have small t truths. All of reality is big T truth, in a very sort of pantheistic way. There actually has been a lot of creative work. I think sometimes, though, we do need to slow down and think about the little fingers we're pointing at the moon, and are we being intentional about using it? 'Cause every now and then this is not a UU example, this is actually a Quaker example. When the Quakers were publishing their most recent hymnal, they tried to de-genderfy some common hymns. And there's a part in A Mighty Fortress Is Our God that has a line about Satan. And because they tried to de-genderfy the pronouns, it becomes ambiguous whether the pronoun is pointing back to Jesus or the devil. And it's people who are focused on music professionally, they look at this kind of thing and they groan. Because that kind of an updating of a hymn shouldn't have happened. Because when you're changing genders, you're trying to you want to make sure that you're being clear what you're pointing back to and not leaving ambiguous pronouns. But it's, I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but it is, the words people use for their higher power, this sounds like an AA meeting now, are important because people are often trying to affirm some quality that they've experienced. Whether that is in a blatantly theistic term, or even in non-theistic terms where people are thinking about nature as their higher power.
I brought that up only because it occurred to me from what you said, thinking about, gee, what do other people who come into contact with Unitarian Universalism services, words, hymns, whatever, what do they think about not seeing Lord and Jesus
and that's why even within the UUA you've got this interesting spectrum of congregations. Some that are very rigorously non-theistic, some that are very Christian, some that are all sorts of things in between. I know of a couple that are even fairly pagan-esque, I guess I would call it, in their thinking and practice. I spent time for a while in a church in Michigan that no longer exists. It was a more Christian-oriented UU church. It was created by people who were reading Marcus Borg books. And decided, why don't we start a church? And then after they started it, well, what do we affiliate it with? They affiliated eventually with the UUA. But sometimes people from other parts of the UUA would come there and go, oh, we used a gender-inclusive version of the Lord's Prayer. Instead of our Father was our God, who art in heaven. But people recoiled. And there was one union minister who said, don't you think some of the people who are here at this church find your church kind of irrelevant or boring? And just as a kind of reality check, that because the language does matter. It's our common reference. And it's hard to be everything to everyone all the time.
I can give you a suggestion that Tara uses, Church of the Brethren, which is pretty high ground. But she's pretty, I wouldn't say militantly feminist, but she's pretty determinedly feminist. Anytime she starts a prayer where anybody in the normal Christian religion would use Lord, she would use Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer. She describes who God is for her. Creator, now this is a purely Christian, creator of the universe. The Redeemer, one who saves the universe, and Sustainer, one who keeps us going during the day. So that is a gender neutral, something that still appeases those who are traditionalists, but also helps those who want to see a little bit farther.
Yeah, and and actually, I've seen that practice used a fair amount in the United Church of Christ when people are invoking the Trinity.
Yes.
To use Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer, or Creator, Redeemer, and Spirit. As just like a little footnote, these language exercises, I call them exercises instead of games, because I think they are important and they do work us spiritually. This is like a long-standing thing in the Western world. There are fascinating things written by female medieval mystics. Julian of Norwich. There's another one I'm thinking of, and I can't quite pull her name in my head, who speaks of Jesus Christ as her mother. And that opens up a whole, going back, that opens up a whole world for people who, particularly for transgender people, who are trying to look for a language and a place in faith communities. And I forgot, I wish I could remember her name. But she said, what better name to call this loving presence in my life than my mother? Which is just fascinating. And yet I know some people, particularly in churches that have never had any exposure to anything before the Reformation, would be scandalized with the thought of good Christian ladies talking about Jesus as their mother. Another place, who nourishes me at her breast. And there's psalm language as well that does that. That I would be, I'm not the kind of person who quote chapter and verse. It would be more convenient if I could. There's a very short psalm that talks about becoming still and quiet, like an infant at his mother's breast or her breast. I'm not sure how the Hebrew gets translated. I could blather on for a long time. I don't want to stop you.
I think we're about there. Anyone else? All right, thank you. And I think this is, for me personally, this is a very important part of Unitarian Universalism, is to be able to speak your mind, expand your mind, ask your questions, and learn from one another what is important and what is not important.
Conversation can be a wonderful thing. I know we are one of the traditions that value that. Judaism also does a good job. That's why rabbinical debate is such a good thing, and nobody goes home angry, or not supposed to. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's time for our offering. If you can't read that, it says him. No, he doesn't want a cookie. He says I can have 2. Don't be like him. This is our chance to share our cookies with everyone else. So let's see if I have a offering statement. Is The River of Community by John Saxon. A religious community is like a river formed from the many streams of our lives that meet and merge and flow to the sea. As members and friends of this religious community, we share our time and energy, our creativity, imagination, vision, our talents, our skills and gifts with the streams of our individual lives to create a river that is both deep and broad. A river that is made of many streams, sustains life, and refreshes the land through which it flows. But the river of this community also depends on our shared financial support that makes real our shared values and visions. And April showers. faith. The heavens broke and love came down. Oh, yes, Lord. And we all know that they were probably talking to Mom at that time. Our closing words are 683 in the back of your hymnal. Be ours a religion like sunshine that goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual, works of love, its profession of faith, divine living. And the posture. have eyes for you. Beautiful song. That finishes our worship service at First Universalist in New Madison. Stay safe, wear your mask. If you need some help in anything in your adventures of life, please let us know. We're here to help. Our day-old offering today is croissants back on the table if anybody wants one.